The Black Reaper's motorcycle gang thought they were just having some fun, mocking a lone woman at a remote Nevada gas station. They had no idea she was Commander Emma Lancaster, one of the most decorated Navy officers in recent history. Their fatal mistake would unravel a billion-dollar international arms trafficking network, expose corruption at the highest levels of military command, and bring down one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises in the world. What started as simple intimidation at a desert fuel stop would expose a conspiracy that reached from outlaw biker gangs all the way to the Pentagon itself. The Black Reapers were about to learn a brutal lesson about underestimating their opponents, and Commander Lancaster was about to teach it. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The desert wind whipped across Emma Lancaster's face as her Triumph Tiger 900 Rally Pro carved through the empty highway. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the barren landscape, transforming the cacti into twisted sentries standing guard over her solitude. At 42, Emma wore her years with the quiet dignity of someone who had seen too much, yet refused to let it break her spirit. Her fingers unconsciously traced the Navy Commander insignia on her leather jacket, a habit born from 15 years of service. The weight of the metal in her inside pocket seemed heavier today, though she'd carried it every day since the ceremony 6 months ago. Commander Lancaster, your leadership during the hostage crisis demonstrates the highest traditions of naval service. The memory of Admiral Chen's words faded as quickly as it had surfaced, replaced by a more haunting image: Ryan's empty apartment, case files scattered across his desk, and that damned sticky note with his last message. Trust no one but the stars. Her kid brother had always been cryptic, even when they were children, but this was different. This was a warning. Emma's grip tightened on the handlebars as another flashback hit her. She was back on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, coordinating a counterterrorism operation off the coast of Yemen. The satellite phone in her hand felt like lead as she listened to her mother's voicemail. Emma, honey, Ryan's missing. 3 days now. The department says he was working undercover, but something's wrong. He needed you, Emma. He needed his sister. The roar of her engine couldn't drown out the guilt that had become her constant companion. While she was being celebrated for saving 32 hostages halfway around the world, her own brother had vanished without a trace. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd dedicated her life to protecting others, yet failed to protect the one person who mattered most. A battered sign advertising last chance gas, 2 miles, drew her attention back to the present. Her fuel gauge hovered just above empty, forcing a stop she'd rather avoid. The sun was getting low, and she preferred traveling at night when the desert roads belonged to the stars and solitude. The gas station materialized like a mirage, a weather-beaten structure that had seen better days decades ago. Emma pulled up to the pump, killing the engine. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic ping of her cooling engine and the distant cry of a circling hawk. She was halfway through refueling when the rumble of multiple motorcycles shattered the desert's peace. A group of riders appeared on the horizon, their chrome gleaming in the late afternoon sun. As they drew closer, Emma's trained eye counted 8 bikes, all Harley-Davidsons, customized for both show and intimidation. The lead rider's jacket caught her attention, a black leather cut emblazoned with a grinning Reaper wielding a smoking gun instead of the traditional scythe. The Black Reapers. Emma's jaw clenched. She'd memorized their patches while going through Ryan's case files. Arms trafficking, protection rackets, drug running, the list of their suspected activities was as long as their rap sheet. The bikers pulled into the station in a practiced formation, their engines synchronized growl dropping to an idle before cutting out entirely. Their leader, a tall man with a serpentine tattoo crawling up his neck, dismounted first. His eyes, hidden behind mirrored aviators, surveyed the scene before landing on Emma. Well, what do we have here? His voice carried the rasp of too many cigarettes and not enough sleep. Looks like we found ourselves a lost little Navy girl. Emma continued fueling her bike, her expression neutral even as she cataloged potential threats. The leader, Cobra, according to Ryan's notes, sauntered closer, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. "Nice ride," he drawled, running a finger along her bike's frame. "Though I gotta say, sweetheart, military types usually prefer something more practical. This is a lot of machine for a lady." His crew chuckled on cue, spreading out in a loose semicircle. Emma replaced the fuel cap, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "The Navy teaching women to ride these days?" Cobra pressed, removing his sunglasses to reveal eyes the color of dirty ice. "Or is this some kind of equal opportunity program?" Emma turned to face him, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding rooms full of hardened sailors. "The Navy taught me a lot of things, including how to spot overcompensating when I see it." The chuckles died instantly. Cobra's smile remained, but it no longer reached his eyes. A younger member of the gang, barely out of his teens with crash stitched on his cut, stepped forward, his face flushed with angry embarrassment. "You hear what this bitch said to Cobra?" Crash's hand shot out, grabbing Emma's arm. It was the last mistake he'd make that day. In one fluid motion, Emma trapped his hand against her bicep, stepped into his space, and executed a perfect arm drag that sent him sprawling face first into the dust. Before he could recover, she had his wrist locked behind his back, her boot resting lightly between his shoulder blades. "First lesson they teach you in the Navy," Emma said calmly, applying just enough pressure to make Crash whimper is proper grip strength. "Too loose, you drop what you're holding. Too tight." She increased the pressure slightly, causing him to yelp. "Well, things tend to break." The other gang members tensed, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. Cobra raised his hand, halting them. His smile had transformed into something uglier, more genuine. "Easy there, Commander," he said, emphasizing her rank with mock respect. "Crash here's young, still learning his manners. Why don't you let him up before this gets complicated?" Emma released her hold, stepping back as Crash scrambled to his feet, his face burning with humiliation. He opened his mouth to say something, but Cobra's sharp look silenced him. "You've got skills, I'll give you that," Cobra continued, lighting a cigarette with deliberate slowness. "But out here in the desert, skills only get you so far. Out here, it's about numbers, about knowing the territory." He blew a stream of smoke in her direction. "About knowing who your friends are." "I'm not looking for friends," Emma replied, swinging her leg over her bike seat. "No." Cobra's smile turned predatory.
"Shame."
"Because you're about to make some powerful enemies." Emma started her engine, the Triumph's growl drowning out the tension-filled silence. "Is that a threat?" "Consider it a friendly warning. You're going to regret what happened here today." Emma's eyes met his, cold and unafraid. "Try me." She pulled out of the station, her mirror reflecting Cobra's unchanging smile. As she accelerated onto the highway, she caught a glimpse of another gang member, heavily built with a mechanical precision to his movements, noting something in his phone. Diesel, her memory supplied, the gang's enforcer and tech expert. The sun was setting now, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. Emma knew she should feel worried, maybe even scared. Instead, she felt something else, something she hadn't experienced since her last deployment. Purpose. The Black Reapers were connected to whatever Ryan had been investigating. She was sure of it now. And if they were following her, well, that just meant she wouldn't have to waste time tracking them down. Behind her, the gang's motorcycles roared to life, their headlights cutting through the growing darkness like predatory eyes. But Emma Lancaster had spent her career being underestimated by fellow officers, by enemies, by life itself. She'd proven them all wrong. As the desert night closed in around her, Emma allowed herself a small smile. The game was on, and she was playing for keeps. Somewhere out there, Ryan was waiting. And this time, his big sister wasn't going to let him down. The stars were beginning to emerge overhead, scattered like breadcrumbs across the darkening sky. "Trust no one but the stars," Ryan had written. Emma gunned the engine, her bike eating up the miles as she disappeared into the gathering darkness, leaving the Black Reapers to follow in her wake, their headlights growing smaller and smaller until they were indistinguishable from the stars themselves. The neon sign of the Desert Rose Diner cast a pale pink glow across Emma's face as she settled into a corner booth, positioning herself with a clear view of both exits and the parking lot where her Triumph stood in the pre-dawn darkness. The coffee in front of her had gone cold, forgotten as she spread Ryan's case files across the worn Formica tabletop. "More coffee, hon?" The waitress, Betty according to her name tag, held up a steaming pot. Her weathered face showed concern at Emma's obvious exhaustion. "Please." Emma managed a tired smile, sliding her cup forward. She'd been on the road for hours after her encounter with the Black Reapers, taking a maze of backroads before finally stopping at this quiet diner just outside of Millbrook. As Betty topped off her cup, her eyes flickered to the photos and documents scattered across the table. "Doing research?" "Something like that." Emma took a sip of the fresh coffee, savoring its bitter warmth. "Just trying to connect some dots." "Well, holler if you need anything else." "Kitchen's open all night." Betty moved away, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts and her brother's investigation. The files told a story, one that Ryan had been piecing together bit by bit before he vanished. Reports of weapons shipments appearing in unlikely places. Small-town police departments suddenly equipped with military-grade hardware. And always, hovering at the edges, mentions of the Black Reapers. Emma pulled out her own notebook, adding fresh observations about the gang. Cobra's confident demeanor suggested protection from higher up. Their bikes were too well-maintained for a typical outlaw gang, and their tactical formation at the gas station had been almost military in its precision. A familiar pain gripped her chest as she uncovered a photo tucked between pages of Ryan's notes. It was from his academy graduation, Ryan in his crisp new uniform, their mother beaming with pride, and Emma in her navy dress whites. They'd been so close once. The memory hit her like a physical blow. 3 years ago. I need you." Ryan's voice crackled over the satellite phone.
"Mom's sick."
"Cancer. They're saying maybe 6 months." Emma's hand tightened on the phone as she paced her quarters aboard the carrier. "How bad?" "Stage 4. She's asking for you. The doctors want to start aggressive treatment, but she won't do it unless you're here." A pause. "I know you're up for promotion, but..." "Ryan, I can't just leave. We're in the middle of a critical operation. Lives are at stake. Mom's life is at stake." His voice broke. "You've always chosen the Navy first. Just once, choose us. That's not fair. You know what this deployment means. If we can take down this terror cell, save it, Em. I'll tell Mom you send your love." The line went dead. Their mother had rallied, surviving another year despite the odds. Emma had made it home for the last 2 months, but the damage to her relationship with Ryan had been done. He'd never fully forgiven her for not being there at the beginning of their mother's fight. Present day. Emma blinked away tears, forcing herself back to the present. Her fingers traced the edges of a newspaper clipping about an arms bust gone wrong. 3 officers dead, the weapons vanished, and the suspects, members of the Black Reapers, had somehow escaped custody despite being surrounded by SWAT. "The broker strikes again," Ryan had scrawled in the margin. The broker. The name kept appearing in Ryan's notes, always connected to the biggest weapons deals. No photos, no physical description, just a shadow puppeteer pulling strings from behind the scenes. Ryan had been getting close, too close. Emma's phone buzzed, making her jump. A text from an unknown number. "Nice spike. Shame if something happened to it." Her head snapped up. Through the window, she could see her Triumph, still alone in the parking lot. But something felt wrong. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, a sensation that had saved her life more than once in combat. Moving casually, she began gathering her files, keeping her movements smooth and unhurried. Betty appeared with a check, but Emma was already pulling out cash. "Keep the change," she said, sliding a generous tip across the table. "And Betty, if anyone asks, I was headed east." The waitress's eyes widened slightly, but she gave a slight nod. She'd worked the graveyard shift long enough to know when someone was in trouble. Emma had just reached the diner's door when she heard it, the distant rumble of multiple motorcycles. The sound was getting closer. She burst through the door, sprinting for her bike. The roar of engines was louder now, accompanied by the sweep of headlights approaching from both directions. The Black Reapers had found her. Emma swung onto her Triumph, the engine roaring to life beneath her. Through her mirrors, she could see bikes appearing at both ends of the street, at least 6 of them, blocking her escape routes. A familiar figure pulled up at the head of the group. Cobra removed his helmet, his face illuminated by the diner's neon glow. "End of the road, Commander. Let's talk about that attitude adjustment you're due." Emma's mind raced, evaluating options. The main road was blocked, but behind the diner, she gunned the engine, launching her bike forward directly at Cobra's group. At the last second, she swerved hard, cutting across the diner's empty side lot. Her Triumph bounced over the curb, tires finding purchase on the packed dirt of a service alley. "Get her!" Cobra's voice carried over the engine noise. "Don't let her reach the highway." Emma's military training kicked in as she navigated the narrow alley. The Triumph's advanced suspension system absorbed the rough terrain, giving her an advantage over the Harleys in pursuit. She broke out onto a parallel street, taking a sharp right onto what she hoped was the road to the county highway. Her pursuers split up, trying to cut off her escape routes. 2 bikes roared past side streets ahead of her, while others maintained pursuit from behind. They were trying to herd her, she realized, forcing her onto a predictable path. A truck suddenly backed out of a driveway ahead. Emma laid her bike down hard to the right, sliding underneath the truck's chassis in a shower of sparks. She heard crashes behind her as at least one pursuer failed to react in time. Rolling out from under the truck, Emma pulled her bike upright and kicked it back to life. Every muscle screamed in protest, but adrenaline kept her moving. She could see the highway ahead, but more headlights were converging from side streets. "Come on, girl," she muttered to her bike, pushing it to its limits. The Triumph responded like a living thing, eating up the distance to the highway. But the Reapers were closing in, their engines howling in the night. A shot rang out, the bullet whining past her helmet. They weren't playing anymore. Emma swerved erratically, making herself a harder target while scanning for options. There, a narrow gap between 2 buildings, barely wide enough for a bike. She cut hard right, scraping her boots on the pavement as she threaded the needle between the structures. The alley opened onto a railroad crossing. Emma grabbed air as her bike launched over the tracks, landing hard but maintaining control. Behind her, she heard crashes and cursing as some of her pursuers wiped out on the uneven crossing. But she wasn't clear yet. Headlights appeared ahead, more gang members trying to cut her off. Emma realized with growing dread that they had coordinated this ambush with professional precision. These weren't just thugs on bikes. This was a military-style operation. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Without taking her eyes off the road, she activated her helmet's hands-free system. "Kind of busy right now," she growled. "Emma? It's Sarah Hall. Got your message about the Reapers?" Lieutenant Sarah Hall, Emma's former intelligence officer and one of the few people she still trusted. "Sarah, I need everything you've got on these guys. They're not just bikers. The way they move, the way they coordinate." "Emma, listen to me." Sarah's voice was tight with concern. "You need to back off. The Reapers are protected. I've been digging since you called, and what I'm finding, there are names involved that shouldn't be involved. High-ranking names." A bullet shattered Emma's side mirror. "Little late for backing off, Sarah. They're shooting at me." "Jesus, Em." Sarah paused. "Okay, there's an abandoned quarry 2 miles ahead. Take the access road. It's too narrow for them to flank you. I'm sending coordinates now." Emma's GPS pinged with a new waypoint. "Sarah, what aren't you telling me? The local cops won't help you. Half of them are on the take, and the other half are too scared to move against the Reapers. Whatever Ryan stumbled onto, it goes deep, all the way to..." Static suddenly filled the line. "Sarah?" "Sarah." The connection was dead. Emma's mind raced as she pushed her bike harder. The quarry ahead would give her cover, but it was also a potential trap. The Reapers seemed to know these roads too well, had too much tactical knowledge. This wasn't just about a confrontation at a gas station anymore. She thought of Ryan's message, "Trust no one but the stars." Had he discovered the same thing? The corruption in local law enforcement, The military precision of the gang, the mysterious broker pulling strings from the shadows? The quarry access road appeared ahead, a barely visible track cutting through the darkness. Emma took it at full speed, her bike's suspension groaning as she bounced over the uneven surface. The Reapers followed, but they were forced to ride single file now, unable to maintain their coordinated pursuit. The road wound downward into the quarry pit, massive walls of rock rising on either side. Emma's headlight illuminated abandoned equipment, creating strange shadows that played tricks with depth perception. She needed to find a way out that wouldn't leave her trapped. Behind her, Cobra's voice carried over the engine noise. "Nowhere left to run, Commander. Make it easy on yourself." Emma's response was to gun her engine, aiming for a pile of gravel that formed a makeshift ramp. The Triumph roared up the incline, catching air as it cleared the top. For a moment, she was flying, the desert stretching out below her in the moonlight. The landing was brutal, but she maintained control, speeding away into the darkness as confused shouts echoed from the quarry behind her. She'd bought herself some time, but she knew this was just the beginning. Miles later, after ensuring she wasn't being followed, Emma pulled over in a sheltered canyon. Her hands were shaking as the adrenaline wore off. She pulled out her phone, trying Sarah's number again, but it went straight to voicemail. The pieces were starting to come together, forming a picture she didn't like. The Black Reapers weren't just muscle for hire, they were an integral part of something bigger. Something that had tentacles reaching into law enforcement, possibly even the military. Something that had gotten Ryan too close to the truth. Emma's jaw set with determination as she studied the stars overhead. She'd chosen duty over family once before, and Ryan had paid the price. She wouldn't make that mistake again. Back at the quarry, Cobra watched the desert horizon, his face illuminated by the ember of his cigarette. Diesel approached, limping slightly from the railroad crossing wipeout. "She's good," Diesel admitted grudgingly. "Military training, obviously, but there's more to it. She knows our tactics." Cobra took a long drag before responding. "Call our friend in the department. I want eyes on every traffic camera, every gas station, every motel between here and the state line." He pulled out his phone, scrolling to a number he rarely used. "Time to let the broker know we've got a problem." The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent to the drama playing out below. Somewhere out there, Ryan was waiting. And this time, Emma wasn't going to let anything stop her from bringing him home. She kicked her bike back to life, the engine's rumble echoing off the canyon walls. The night was still young, and she had work to do. The Black Reapers had shown their hand, revealing connections she never would have discovered otherwise. Now it was her turn to take the fight to them. As she rode into the darkness, Emma couldn't help but smile grimly. They thought they were hunting her, but they had it backwards. She was hunting them, and through them, she would find the broker, find Ryan, and burn their whole corrupt operation to the ground. The desert night swallowed her headlight, leaving only the stars to guide her way. "Trust no one but the stars," Ryan had written. Tonight, she finally understood what he meant. The abandoned Rattlesnake Valley airstrip stretched before Emma like a cracked concrete scar across the desert floor. Dawn was still hours away, but the full moon cast enough light to make out the deteriorating hangars and the rusted windsock hanging limply from its pole. According to Sarah's intel, before the call had been cut off, this was one of the Black Reapers' primary meeting points. Emma killed the Triumph's engine half a mile out, pushing it behind a cluster of Joshua trees. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of creosote and dust. She retrieved her gear from the saddlebags. Night vision monocular, a compact digital camera with infrared capabilities, and the tactical vest she'd brought from her Navy days. As she secured the vest, her fingers brushed against the commander's insignia. How many night ops had she overseen? How many times had she sent teams into situations just like this? Now she was alone, without backup, tracking a dangerous gang through their own territory. The irony wasn't lost on her. The sound came first, the distant thrum of heavy engines, but not motorcycles. Emma dropped to a crouch, bringing up the night vision monocular. Through the green-tinted view, she watched as two unmarked trucks approached the airstrip from the opposite direction. Their headlights were off, running dark and confident on familiar ground. "Let's see what you're up to," Emma muttered, activating the camera's infrared mode. She began recording as the trucks pulled up to the largest hangar. The heavy doors groaned open, revealing more vehicles inside. Men moved with military precision, unloading crates with practiced efficiency. Emma zoomed in on the markings. U.S. Army, M4A1 carbine, Lot 457. Her jaw clenched. These weren't black market knockoffs. These were genuine military weapons, diverted from official channels. The kind of hardware that could only be acquired with high-level cooperation. The familiar rumble of motorcycles drew her attention. The Black Reapers were arriving, led by Cobra's distinctive bike with its custom exhaust. Emma counted 12 riders, more than she'd seen at the gas station or during the ambush. This was a major operation. She shifted position to get a better angle, focusing on the exchange between Cobra and a man in tactical gear who'd emerged from the hangar. The camera's directional microphone picked up fragments of their conversation. "Ahead of schedule," the tactical man was saying. "Broker wants confirmation. Tell him it's handled," Cobra replied. "We've got a situation to deal with first." Ex-Navy buy. A loose stone skittered beneath Emma's boot. The sound was tiny, barely audible over the ambient noise, but Cobra's head snapped up like a predator catching a scent. Emma froze, but it was too late. One of the tactical team's spotlights swept the ridge where she was hidden. "We've got company," Cobra's voice carried across the airstrip. "Find them." Emma was already moving, staying low as she sprinted back to her bike. Behind her, engines roared to life and voices shouted commands. The element of surprise was gone, but she had what she came for: proof of the weapons shipment and a direct connection to the broker. The Triumph's engine caught on the first try. Emma gunned it, throwing up a rooster tail of dust as she accelerated away from the airstrip. In her mirrors, headlights blazed to life, spreading out in a search pattern. They knew the territory better than she did, but she had one advantage. They'd have to split their forces between pursuing her and securing the weapons shipment. A bullet cracked past her helmet, too close for comfort. Emma swerved, making herself a harder target as she plotted her route. The main road would be suicide. They'd have vehicles waiting to cut her off. But the desert, she smiled grimly. Time to put her advanced riding training to use. She cut hard right, taking the Triumph off-road into the boulder-strewn landscape. The bike's suspension soaked up the rough terrain as she wove between rock formations. Behind her, she heard crashes and cursing as less experienced riders tried to follow her line. "Spread out." Cobra's voice carried over their radio channel. "Don't let her reach the highway." Emma had no intention of heading for the highway. Instead, she led her pursuers deeper into the maze of rock formations, using her lighter, more maneuverable bike to her advantage. The moon cast sharp shadows between the boulders, creating natural obstacles that would force her pursuers to slow down or risk wiping out. Time for the first trap. Emma cut through a narrow gap between two rock faces, scraping her saddlebags, but making it through. As she emerged, she snap-kicked a balanced boulder, sending it tumbling down behind her. The resulting crash and cursing told her at least one rider had gone down. But more were still coming. Emma counted at least 6 bikes still in pursuit, with Cobra's lead bike gaining ground. She needed to thin their numbers further. The terrain opened up into a dry wash, a natural drainage channel carved by flash floods. Emma followed it, picking up speed on the relatively smooth surface. In her mirrors, she saw her pursuers bunch up, taking advantage of the easier riding. Perfect. Emma reached into her vest and pulled out a smoke grenade, courtesy of her Navy equipment cache. She pulled the pin with her teeth and dropped it behind her, the purple smoke creating a dense cloud in the wash. The pursuing bikes burst through the smoke at full speed, only to find Emma's bike laid down across the channel. 2 more riders went down hard, their bikes tangling as they tried to avoid the obstacle. Emma was already running up the wash's steep bank, where she'd stashed her bike behind a ridge. By the time the remaining pursuers cleared the smoke, she was back on the road and accelerating away. But her victory was short-lived. The Triumph's engine made a sickening sound. Something was wrong. The early morning light revealed damage to the bike's radiator, probably from debris during the off-road chase. The temperature gauge was climbing rapidly. Ahead, the ruins of an old mining town emerged from the pre-dawn gloom. Maverick's Rest, according to the weathered sign. The collection of abandoned buildings might provide cover, and she needed to assess the damage to her bike. Emma guided the struggling Triumph between the skeletal remains of what had once been the town's main street. The engine's labored sounds echoed off empty storefronts and collapsing wooden structures. She killed the power before it could seize completely, coasting to a stop behind what looked like an old mechanic's garage. The sound of approaching motorcycles had her moving fast. Emma pushed her bike inside the garage, then quickly surveyed her surroundings. The building was surprisingly intact, with old tools still hanging on the walls and an inspection pit in the floor, perfect for both repairs and defense. She had barely concealed herself when the first Black Reapers rode into town. Through gaps in the weathered boards, she watched as they split into teams, methodically beginning their search. "Check every building," Cobra ordered. "She's here somewhere." Bike's too damaged to get far. Emma unclipped the radio from her vest, standard military issue, capable of scanning multiple frequencies. It took only moments to pick up the gang's channel. "Nothing in the saloon," a voice crackled. "Moving to the hotel." "Keep looking," Cobra responded. "And watch yourselves. This one's got training." Another voice cut in, one of the riders she disabled at the wash. "Boss, you should see this." The trick she pulled with the smoke, that was military-grade equipment. Special Forces type stuff. "I don't care if she's fucking SEAL Team 6, Cobra snarled. "Find her." Emma used their radio chatter to track their movements, noting how they maintained disciplined search patterns. These weren't just thugs playing soldier, they had real tactical training. The question was, who had trained them? A floorboard creaked behind her. Emma spun, but she was a fraction too slow. A massive figure burst through a hidden door, tackling her into the inspection pit. Her radio clattered away as they grappled in the confined space. She recognized her attacker, one of the tactical team members from the airstrip. He had at least 50 pounds on her, and in the tight space, her usual techniques were limited. But Emma hadn't survived 15 years in the Navy by fighting fair. She drove her knee up, not into his groin where he was protected, but into the softer target of his inner thigh. As he instinctively shifted his weight, she hooked her foot behind his ankle and twisted sharply. They both went down, but Emma landed on top, driving her elbow into his solar plexus. The man wheezed, but managed to grab her throat. Emma responded by jamming her thumb into the pressure point behind his ear. His grip loosened just enough for her to break free. She followed up with a sharp strike to his throat, leaving him gasping on the floor of the pit. Emma scrambled out, retrieving both her radio and her opponent's earpiece. Through it, she could hear Cobra coordinating the search, but there was something else. Mentions of an upcoming meeting. "Broker wants delivery confirmed by Friday," a voice was saying. "Full shipment of M4S plus the prototype weapon systems." "Tell him he'll get confirmation," Cobra replied. "Once we deal with our Navy problem." The sound of approaching footsteps had Emma moving again. She dragged the unconscious tactical officer into a corner, using his own zip ties to secure him. A quick search of his pockets yielded another piece of the puzzle, a military ID card identifying him as Master Sergeant James Cooper, currently listed as on leave from Fort Carson. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about stolen weapons, this was an organized operation with military involvement. Was this what Ryan had discovered? Emma's thoughts were interrupted by an enraged roar from outside. Cobra had found his disabled men. "I want her head," his voice carried both over the radio and through the thin walls. "You hear me, Commander? This isn't about business anymore. Your whole fucking military career. Thinking you're better than us? I'm going to show you what real warriors can do." The personal vendetta in his voice was unmistakable. Emma needed to move fast. She turned her attention to her damaged bike, assessing what she had to work with. The garage's ancient tools were mostly rusted, but she spotted something better, a vintage Indian motorcycle up on blocks, its radiator intact and compatible enough to jury-rig a repair. Working quickly, Emma stripped the parts she needed. Her hands moved with practiced precision, All those hours helping Ryan restore his old Harley were finally paying off. The adaptation wouldn't be pretty, but it would get her out of here. Outside, the search was tightening. Footsteps crunched on broken glass, moving closer to the garage. Emma tightened the last connection, silently praying to whatever gods watched over desperate mechanics. A voice called from just outside, "Hey boss, think I found something." Emma swung onto the bike, hitting the starter. The engine caught with a roar that shattered the pre-dawn quiet. She burst through the garage's rear wall in a shower of rotted wood, catching her pursuers completely off guard. Cobra's furious voice followed her. "Don't let her escape. Shoot the damn tires." But Emma was already weaving between buildings, making herself a harder target as she built speed. Bullets whined past her, kicking up dust, but finding no purchase. She spotted an old loading ramp behind the town's warehouse and gunned for it. The Triumph launched into the air, sailing over a group of startled bikers. Emma landed hard but maintained control, her jury-rigged repair holding as she disappeared into the desert landscape. Behind her, Cobra watched her escape with cold fury. He turned to one of his men. "Call our friend at the department. I want roadblocks on every route out of the county." His hand closed around the military ID he'd found next to his unconscious tactical officer. "And get me a secure line to the base. Time to remind some people where their loyalties lie." The sun was rising now, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Emma pushed her damaged bike as fast as she dared, knowing she needed to find a safe place to process what she discovered. The weapons, the military connection, Cobra's vendetta, it all tied back to the broker. She thought of Ryan's message again. Trust no one but the stars. He must have discovered the same conspiracy, the military connection, the corruption reaching into multiple agencies. No wonder he'd gone dark. The stars were fading with the coming dawn, but Emma could still make out the morning star on the horizon. She adjusted her course to follow it. She had evidence now, proof of the illegal weapons shipment and military involvement. The next step was finding out who the broker was and how high this conspiracy reached. Behind her, the ghost town grew smaller in her mirrors, but she knew this was just the beginning. The Black Reapers weren't just another biker gang. They were trained, organized, and connected. They'd come after her again, and next time they'd be better prepared. Emma allowed herself a grim smile. Let them come. They thought they were hunting her, but with every encounter, she was learning more about their operation. And soon, she'd know enough to bring their whole corrupt empire crashing down. The morning star beckoned, leading her deeper into the desert. Somewhere out there, Ryan was waiting. And this time, she had proof that his investigation wasn't just paranoid speculation. It was the tip of a very dangerous iceberg. The Triumph's engine hummed beneath her, the jury-rigged repair holding steady. Emma Lancaster had survived worse odds, in worse places, against worse enemies. This time, she wasn't fighting for her country or her career. This time, she was fighting for family. And God help anyone who got in her way. The sun had climbed high in the desert sky by the time Emma's jury-rigged radiator finally gave out. Steam hissed from beneath the Triumph's cowling as she guided it into the shadow of a massive rock formation. She'd managed to put 40 miles between herself and the ghost town, but her bike wouldn't take her much further without proper repairs. The sound of an approaching motorcycle had her drawing her sidearm, but this was different from the thundering Harleys of the Black Reapers. A single bike, running quiet, coming from the east. Emma positioned herself behind a boulder, weapon ready. A dusty BMW adventure bike appeared, its rider wearing desert camo instead of gang colors. He stopped 30 yards out, killing the engine. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hands to remove his helmet. "Commander Lancaster?" His voice carried clearly across the distance. "My name's Reed Martinez, and I think we need to talk about Ryan." Emma's grip tightened on her weapon. "How do you know my brother's name?" "Because I'm the one who helped him start investigating the Black Reapers." Reed kept his hands visible. "And I'm probably the only person within 100 miles who wants to keep you alive right now." "Former gang member?" Emma studied his face, late 30s, weathered by sun and hard living, with a scar running along his jaw. Reed nodded. 3 years with the Reapers. Left about 8 months ago after I figured out what Cobra was really up to. He nodded toward her smoking bike. Looks like you could use a mechanic. I've got tools, and I know a safe place we can talk. Emma weighed her options. Her military instincts screamed at her not to trust him, but she was out of alternatives. Any sudden moves and you'll be picking lead out of your chest. Fair enough. Reed smiled grimly. But we should move soon. Cobra's got eyes everywhere, and that steam trails like a beacon. 20 minutes later, they were winding through a narrow canyon, Reed's BMW leading the way. Emma's Triumph limped along behind, the engine protesting every mile. Finally, the canyon opened into a hidden valley where a small cabin sat nestled against the rock face. Old Prospector's Place, Reed explained as they parked. Off the grid, no road access. Been my home since I left the gang. The cabin's interior was sparse but organized, with maps covering one wall and a ham radio setup in the corner. Reed immediately moved to a workbench, pulling out tools. Let's get your bike sorted first. Cobra won't think to look here, but better to have a working escape route. As they worked on the Triumph, Reed began filling in the gaps in Emma's knowledge. The Black Reapers weren't always like this. Used to be just another outlaw club, illegal, sure, but small time. That changed when the broker approached Cobra 3 years ago. Who is he? Emma asked, passing Reed a wrench. The broker? More like a they than a he. The broker's an organization, not a person. Ex-military, ex-intelligence types who saw an opportunity in the chaos overseas. Wars leave a lot of hardware floating around, and a lot of soldiers who know how to use it. Emma thought of the military ID she'd found in the ghost town. They're diverting weapons shipments. Reed nodded. But it's bigger than that. They're building private armies, Commander. Supplying weapons and training to anyone with cash. Cartels, warlords, corrupt governments. The broker doesn't care who buys, as long as the price is right. And the Black Reapers? They're the delivery system. Who looks twice at a bunch of bikers crossing state lines. The gang's been recruiting, ex-military mostly, guys who know how to handle the hardware and follow orders. Cobra gets a cut of every shipment, plus support from corrupt officials. The whole operation's wrapped in so many layers of deniability it's practically invisible. Emma absorbed this as they finished the radiator repair. What about Ryan? How does he fit in? Reed's expression darkened. Ryan was good. Too good. He started noticing patterns in weapon seizures, connecting dots nobody else saw. He reached out to me through a mutual contact, someone who knew my history with the gang. I helped him build his case, fed him intel, until he disappeared. Yeah. Reed wiped his hands on a rag. He was closing in on something big, a connection between the broker and someone high up in military procurement. Then suddenly he goes dark, his files disappear, and the department claims he was working undercover? That's not a coincidence. Emma's mind raced. You think someone inside the department betrayed him? I know they did. Reed moved to one of his maps. Ryan had a partner, Marcus Chen. 2 days before Ryan disappeared, Marcus had a private meeting with a guy I recognized, one of the broker's fixers. Next day, Ryan's gone. The name hit Emma like a physical blow. Marcus had been the one pushing hardest to classify Ryan's disappearance as a routine missing persons case. She'd trusted him, even shared information with him. Why are you helping me? Emma demanded. What's your stake in this? Reed was quiet for a moment. I served 2, Commander. Force Recon, 2 tours in Afghanistan. Came home messed up, fell in with the wrong crowd. The Reapers seemed like a brotherhood, you know? By the time I realized what they'd become. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a massive scar. Cobra didn't take my resignation well. I got lucky, should have been dead. Instead, I ended up here trying to make things right. Ryan was my chance to do that. And now I'm your second chance? Emma's voice was skeptical. You're the best shot we've got at exposing the whole operation. Reed pulled out a laptop. I've been monitoring their communications. There's a big meeting happening soon, weapons demonstration for some foreign buyers. The broker himself will be there. How can you be sure? Because they're showing off something new. Prototype weapon systems, bleeding-edge military tech, that shouldn't exist outside of classified research facilities. The kind of thing that needs a personal touch to sell. Emma studied the intel on Reed's screen. If we could document the meeting, get proof of who's involved. It's not that simple. Reed's voice was grim. You've made yourself a target, Commander. The brokers people know about you now. They'll have contingencies in place. I don't care about the risk. You should. Reed met her eyes. Because, right now, you're useful to them alive. They think you'll lead them to Ryan's evidence, the stuff he hid before he disappeared. But the moment they realize you don't have it, you'll disappear too. Emma processed this. You think Ryan's alive? I know he is. The broker doesn't waste potential assets. They're holding him somewhere, trying to figure out where he's stashed his proof. That's why they haven't moved against you more aggressively. They're watching, waiting to see if you lead them to it. A thought struck Emma. The stars, she murmured. Trust no one but the stars. Reed looked up sharply. What did you say? Ryan's message. He left it right before he disappeared. Emma's mind was racing. He wasn't being poetic. He was leaving coordinates. Understanding dawned on Reed's face. The old astronomy club. Up in the mountains, Ryan used to go there to think. Said it was the only place he could see the stars clearly anymore. You think that's where he hid his evidence? Makes sense. Remote location, good sightlines, multiple escape routes. Reed was already pulling up satellite imagery. But if we're figuring this out, the broker's people might be too. Emma checked her weapon. How far? 2 hours by bike, using the back roads. But Commander. Reed hesitated. If we do this, there's no going back. The broker's organization, the corrupt officials, the military connection, will be taking on some very powerful people. Emma thought of Ryan's empty apartment, of their mother's tears, of all the moments she'd chosen duty over family. Then we better make it count. They spent the next hour planning, Reed sharing everything he knew about the gang's operations. Their hierarchy, their tactics, their safe houses. Emma absorbed it all, but something nagged at her. Why didn't you take this to the authorities? Reed's laugh was bitter. Who would I trust? The local cops are bought. The feds are compromised. How else could the broker's people access classified military hardware? Ryan tried working within the system. Look where that got him. Emma studied Reed's maps, his notes, his surveillance photos. It was thorough. Too thorough for someone operating alone. You're not just a former gang member, are you? Reed met her gaze steadily. Let's just say some people in certain agencies share our concerns about the broker. But they need ironclad proof before they can move. And you're their deniable asset. I prefer independent contractor. Reed checked his watch. Sun's setting. If we're going to reach the astronomy club before the meeting tomorrow, we need to move soon. Emma did one final check of her gear. You understand if this goes wrong, we're both dead. Commander, Reed smiled grimly. I've been dead since the day I walked away from the Reapers. At least this way my ghost might do some good. They walked out to their bikes, the desert wind carrying the first hint of evening cool. Emma looked up at the emerging stars, the same stars that had guided her brother, that might now lead her to him. One more thing, Reed said as they mounted up. The broker's operation? It's not just about weapons. They're selling something bigger, the illusion of control. Every corrupt official they buy, every military officer they compromise, is another thread in their web. They're building an invisible empire, Commander. And empires don't fall easily. Emma kicked her bike to life, the repaired engine purring smoothly. Then we'll just have to hit them harder. The sun was setting behind them as they rode out, 2 bikes disappearing into the gathering darkness. Somewhere ahead lay answers, about Ryan, about the broker, about how deep the corruption really went. But for now, there was only the road, the desert wind, and the stars emerging one by one overhead. Trust no one but the stars, Ryan had written. As the last light faded from the sky, Emma realized he'd been right all along. In a world of shadows and betrayal, the stars were the only constants left, ancient, unchanging, and impossible to corrupt. She just hoped they would lead her to the truth before it was too late. The Black Reaper's compound rose from the desert like a fortified oasis, its high concrete walls topped with razor wire catching the last rays of sunset. Emma and Reed lay prone on a ridge half a mile away, studying the facility through high-powered optics. Main gates heavily guarded, Reed whispered, marking points on a rough sketch. 2 men visible, probably more in the guardhouse. Security cameras on all corners, motion sensors along the perimeter. Emma shifted her position slightly, scanning the compound's eastern wall. They've got military-grade hardware. Those are FLIR cameras, thermal imaging. Getting in undetected won't be easy. That's why we waited for sunset. Reed pointed to a utility pole near the compound's rear fence. Power comes in from the county grid. They've got generators for backup, but the switch isn't instantaneous. A slight smile crossed Emma's face. How long between the power cut and the generators kicking in? 15 seconds, maybe 20. That's your window. Reed checked his watch. Guard change is in 40 minutes. The night shift's usually lighter. They rely more on the tech than manpower. Emma studied the compound's layout through her scope. The main building was a converted warehouse, with several smaller outbuildings arranged around a central courtyard. Heavy trucks were parked in neat rows, their cargo areas covered with tarps. Armed men patrolled in regular patterns, their movements precise and coordinated. These aren't just thugs playing soldier, Emma observed. Look at their formations, their discipline. They've had serious training. Reed nodded grimly. Cobra's been recruiting. Ex-military mostly, guys who came back from deployment and couldn't readjust to civilian life. The broker provides additional training, specialized stuff you don't get even in the service. A convoy of 3 black SUVs approached the main gate, passing through security with minimal checks. Emma zoomed in on the lead vehicle's passengers. Those aren't gang members, she said. Look at their posture, their clothes. Government types. Brokers people, Reed confirmed. Probably hear about the weapons demonstration tomorrow. They're getting bolder, meeting in broad daylight. The sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the desert into twilight. Emma began her final equipment check. Black tactical gear, night vision monocular, comm unit linked to Reed's frequency. Everything chosen for stealth and mobility. Remember, Reed said as she prepared to move out, your priority is reconnaissance only. Get proof of the weapons deals, document any connections to official agencies. But if you spot Ryan, I'm not leaving without confirming his status. Emma's voice was firm. Reed grabbed her arm. Listen to me. The broker's people are careful. If Ryan's here, he'll be heavily guarded. Trying to rescue him now would be suicide. I'm not asking for permission. No, Reed sighed. You're not. Just stick to the plan. I'll create a diversion at the north fence in exactly 30 minutes. Use that window to get what we need, then get out. We can come back for Ryan with proper support. Emma checked her watch, synchronizing it with Reed's. 30 minutes.
And Reed?
If this goes wrong. It won't. He managed a tight smile. But if it does, I've got your back. Now go make your brother proud. Emma moved down the ridge, using the growing darkness for cover. She approached the compound from the east, where the terrain provided the most concealment. The guard patterns were predictable, another sign of military training. Predictability meant exploitable gaps. At precisely 2,100 hours, the compound's external lights flickered and died. Emma was already moving, using her 20-second window to scale the perimeter fence. She dropped into the shadows on the other side just as the generators hummed to life, restoring power to the security systems. The compound's interior was a study in organized chaos. Weapons crates were stacked with military precision, while motorcycles were parked in neat rows near the main building. Emma moved from shadow to shadow, her Navy training taking over as she avoided the patrol routes she'd memorized. Voices drifted from an open window in the main building. Emma pressed herself against the wall, listening. Shipments confirmed for tomorrow night, a cultured voice was saying. The broker wants everything in place before the demonstration. What about the Lancaster situation? This voice belonged to Cobra. She's getting too close. Handle it. But quietly. We don't need another Ryan incident on our hands. Emma's heart jumped. They'd mentioned Ryan. She needed to get inside that building. A explosion suddenly rocked the northern fence. Reed's diversion, right on schedule. Guards rushed toward the disturbance, their shouts filling the night air. Emma used the chaos to slip through a side door, finding herself in a corridor lined with offices. She moved quickly, photographing documents left in plain sight. Weapons manifests, shipping routes, bank statements. The Reapers weren't worried about security inside their own compound. Their mistake. A familiar voice drew her attention. Through a partially open door, she spotted Marcus Chen, Ryan's former partner, speaking with a man in an expensive suit. The astronomy club was a dead end, Marcus was saying. If Ryan hid something there, it's long gone. Then we have no further use for him, the suited man replied. Make the arrangements. Quietly. What about his sisters? Commander Lancaster is becoming a liability. Once we confirm she doesn't have Ryan's evidence, she'll join him. Emma's blood ran cold. Marcus's betrayal hurt, but the confirmation that Ryan was alive gave her hope. She needed to find him before they moved him, or worse. Moving deeper into the compound, she discovered a heavy steel door requiring keycard access. The security was far higher than the rest of the facility. This had to be it. As if confirming her suspicion, the door opened. 2 armed guards emerged, speaking in low voices. Prisoner's getting restless. Says he wants to talk to Cobra. Yeah, well, he's not going to be our problem much longer. Emma waited until they were gone before slipping through the door before it locked. A steep staircase led down to what appeared to be a converted bomb shelter. Motion sensors lined the walls, no way to avoid them. She'd have to move fast. At the bottom of the stairs, through a reinforced window, she saw him. Ryan was handcuffed to a chair in a concrete room, looking thinner than she remembered, but very much alive. A guard sat at a desk outside his cell, monitoring security feeds. Emma's heart screamed at her to act, to get him out now. But Reed was right. A rescue attempt would be suicide. They needed to come back prepared with a proper plan. Alarm suddenly blared through the compound. A voice crackled over the facility's PA system. Security breach in Sector 7. All units respond. They discovered her presence. Emma quickly planted her final surprise. Evidence suggesting one of Cobra's lieutenants, a man named Drake, was working with federal authorities. It would take time for them to realize it was fake, and the resulting paranoia would buy her precious time. She took one last look at Ryan through the window. I'm coming back for you, little brother, she whispered. Hold on. The guard was already standing, reaching for his radio. Emma retreated up the stairs as boots thundered overhead. She needed to find an exit fast. Shouts and running footsteps echoed through the corridors. Emma ducked into an empty office as a group of armed men rushed past. Through the windows, she could see more guards sweeping the compound with tactical lights. Her earpiece crackled. Commander, they're locking down the perimeter. Reed's voice was urgent. You need to move now. Emma keyed her mic once, a silent acknowledgement. She'd spotted her exit route, a ventilation shaft that seemed to lead to the roof. The shaft was tight, but Emma's compact frame allowed her to shimmy upward. She emerged on the roof just as searchlights began sweeping the compound. Staying low, she made her way to the edge where she'd spotted a blind spot in the camera coverage. Below, chaos was erupting. She could hear Cobra shouting orders, demanding a full search. But there was something else, angry accusations, questions about how someone had breached their security. We've got a traitor. Cobra's voice carried clearly. Find them. Nobody leaves until we know who it is. Emma allowed herself a grim smile as she prepared for her escape. Her planted evidence was already sowing discord. By morning, the gang would be tearing itself apart with suspicion. Using a combination of drain pipes and shadows, she made her way down the building's exterior. Guards rushed past below, but their attention was focused inward, searching for the presumed insider threat. She was nearly to the fence when a voice called out, "Stop right there." Emma turned to see Marcus Chen, Ryan's former partner, aiming a pistol at her chest. His hand was steady, his eyes cold. "I should have known you'd try something like this," he said. "Always the hero, just like Ryan. Why'd you do it, Marcus?" "He trusted you." You have no idea what's really going on here. The broker, they're changing the world, creating order from chaos. Ryan couldn't see the bigger picture. By selling weapons to terrorists? Some order. Marcus's face hardened. Last chance, Emma. Tell me where Ryan hid the evidence, and maybe we can work something out. Emma's appeared to consider it. You know what? You're right. I'll tell you exactly where it is. She took a step forward, hands raised. Marcus relaxed slightly, exactly what she'd been waiting for. In one fluid motion, she drew the knife concealed at her lower back and threw it. The blade caught Marcus's shooting hand, sending his weapon clattering to the ground. Emma was already moving, closing the distance before he could recover. A quick strike to his throat dropped him gasping to his knees. That's for my brother, she whispered, before rendering him unconscious with a precise blow. The compound's lights suddenly focused on her position. Emma sprinted for the fence as shouts and gunfire erupted behind her. She hit the fence at full speed, using her momentum to climb. Bullets whined past her as she dropped to the other side. She rolled to absorb the impact and came up running, disappearing into the desert darkness as alarms wailed behind her. 10 minutes later, she rendezvoused with Reed at their predetermined location. His face was grim as she approached. Did you find him? Emma nodded, still catching her breath. He's alive. Basement level, heavy security. But they're planning to move him soon. Then we don't have much time. Reed started his bike. What about the evidence? Better than we hoped. Photos of weapons deals, shipping manifests, bank records. Plus, I got confirmation of government involvement. Marcus Chin was there, meeting with the broker's people. The dirty cops? Reed's expression darkened. That complicates things. It gets worse. They're planning something big, some kind of weapons demonstration tomorrow night. Whatever they're selling, it's beyond anything we've seen before. Reed was quiet for a moment, processing this. You know they'll be expecting us now. Security will be doubled, maybe tripled. Doesn't matter. Emma's voice was steel. I'm not leaving Ryan in there. Whatever they're planning, whatever this demonstration is, we're shutting it down. They rode through the desert night, the compound's searchlights fading behind them. But Emma knew this was just the beginning. She'd found Ryan, confirmed he was alive, but getting him out would take everything they had. And somewhere in that compound, Cobra was discovering her planted evidence, his organization beginning to fracture under the weight of suspicion and paranoia. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and unchanging. Emma thought of Ryan's message again. Trust no one but the stars. Now she understood. In a world of shifting loyalties and betrayal, the stars alone remained constant, silent witnesses to the truth. And tomorrow night, under those same stars, she would return. Not just for Ryan, but for justice. The broker's organization had grown powerful in the shadows, but shadows couldn't exist in the light of day. It was time to bring everything into the light. Dawn painted the desert sky in shades of amber and rose as Emma and Reed reached his cabin hideout. The adrenaline from their compound infiltration was wearing off, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. But Emma couldn't rest, not with Ryan's face still burning in her mind. We need to move fast, she said, spreading their photos and intel across Reed's workbench. They know we've infiltrated once. They'll be expecting another attempt. Reed shook his head, checking the stolen radio frequencies. That's exactly why we need to lay low. Give them time to lower their guard. There is no time. Emma's voice was steel. You saw what they did to him. The shape he's in. I know. But rushing and half-cocked will just get you both killed. Reed adjusted the radio's frequency, catching fragments of encrypted transmissions. Wait. Listen to this. Through the static, a voice emerged. Transfer scheduled for 2,300 hours. Secure facility in Nevada. Broker wants personal oversight. Emma's head snapped up. When?
Tonight.
During the weapons demonstration, Reed's fingers flew over his keyboard, pulling up maps. They're using the chaos of the deal as cover to move Ryan. Then that's our window. Emma studied the compound's layout. Security will be focused on protecting the buyers and merchandise. If we can, there might be another way in. Reed hesitated, then pulled out an old, creased blueprint. Something I never told anyone about. Not even Ryan. The blueprints showed a network of tunnels beneath the compound, a remnant from the facility's original purpose as a Cold War-era research station. The Reapers used them for smuggling, Reed explained. Moving sensitive cargo, without eyes in the sky catching on. But there's a whole section they don't know about. Maintenance tunnels that were sealed off decades ago. Emma traced the tunnel routes with her finger. They connect to the basement level, where they're holding Ryan's, if the blueprints are accurate. But Emma, Reed met her eyes. Those tunnels haven't been maintained in 50 years. Could be flooded, collapsed, full of toxic gas. And the gangs definitely rigged the active sections with booby traps. Nothing we can't handle. Emma was already plotting entry points. You said you have a safe house nearby? With equipment. Reed nodded reluctantly. About 10 miles west. Used it during my Reaper days for special projects. Meanwhile, at the compound, chaos reigned. Cobra had gathered his lieutenants in the main office, his face dark with rage as he played surveillance footage of Emma's escape. Someone helped her, he snarled, slamming his fist on the desk. Someone inside this organization betrayed us. And I want to know who. Drake, his second-in-command, stepped forward. We've questioned everyone who is on duty. No one's talking. Then question them harder. Cobra's eyes fell on a stack of papers Emma had left behind. Fabricated evidence suggesting federal cooperation. These documents, they're good. Too good for someone working alone. The room crackled with tension as gang members exchanged suspicious glances. Emma's planted evidence was doing its work, sowing discord in their ranks. Back at Reed's safe house, Emma sorted through the cached equipment. Body armor, tactical gear, weapons that bore no serial numbers. It was an impressive collection. Standard broker operational kit, Reed explained. They supply their contractors well. Emma paused, something in his voice catching her attention. How do you know so much about their procedures? Reed was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with guilt. Because I worked for them. Before and after the Reapers. Emma's hand moved to her weapon. Explain.
Now.
I wasn't just muscle for the gang. I was the broker's inside man, feeding them intelligence about potential problems. Reed's eyes wouldn't meet hers, including Ryan. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's finger tightened on her trigger. When he started asking questions, getting too close. I reported it. Reed's voice cracked. I told myself it was just business, that they'd just scare him off. I never thought. You're the reason he disappeared. Emma's voice was deadly calm. The reason he was tortured. Yes. Reed finally looked at her. And that's why I have to make it right. Why I've been working against them ever since. Everything I've told you about the tunnels, the compound, the operation, it's all true. Use me, hate me, kill me if you want. But let me help save him first. Emma's training screamed at her to end him right there. But cold logic prevailed. Reed's knowledge was too valuable, his guilt too useful. If you betray us again, she said softly, I'll make you wish Cobra had finished the job when you left the gang. They spent the next hours preparing, checking equipment, memorizing routes. The stolen radio crackled periodically with updates from the compound. Cobra's paranoia was growing, his interrogations becoming more aggressive. As dusk approached, they moved out. The compound's lights blazed against the darkening sky as luxury vehicles began arriving for the weapons demonstration. Emma and Reed approached from the blind side, using the arriving traffic as cover to reach the tunnel entrance. The access point was hidden in a drainage culvert, concealed by years of debris. As they cleared the entrance, Reed's earlier warning proved prophetic. The tunnel air was thick with decay, the walls dripping with moisture. Watch your step, Reed whispered, taking point with a chemical light. And your head. These weren't built for comfort. They moved carefully through the darkness, Emma scanning for tripwires while Reed checked for gas pockets. The first trap came 15 minutes in, a simple pressure plate connected to a shotgun mechanism. Standard Reaper setup, Reed explained as Emma disarmed it. They get more creative further in. He wasn't wrong. They encountered everything from motion sensors to elaborate mechanical traps. Emma's military training proved invaluable, allowing her to spot and neutralize most threats before they triggered. But even she wasn't perfect. A hidden wire caught Reed's ankle, sending a cascade of rusty metal spikes swinging down from the ceiling. Emma tackled him clear, but not before one spike opened a deep gash in his thigh. "Leave me," Reed gasped as Emma examined the wound. "I'll only slow you down." "Not happening." Emma quickly bandaged his leg. "You're the only one who knows these tunnels. Besides, you haven't finished making things right yet." They pressed on, Reed's injury slowing their pace but not stopping it. The tunnels gradually shifted from rough-hewn rock to reinforced concrete. They were entering the compound's foundation. Above them, they could hear the weapons demonstration beginning. The sound of automatic fire echoed through the structure, punctuated by excited voices speaking various languages. "Here," Reed pointed to a maintenance shaft. "This should come up near the cell block." "But, Emma," he grabbed her arm. "There's something else you should know. About Ryan's evidence." "Save it," Emma cut him off. "Let's get him out first. Then we can deal with your confessions." She climbed the shaft carefully, emerging in a utility room exactly where the blueprints indicated. The cell block was just down the corridor, 2 guards visible at their stations. Reed's voice crackled in her earpiece, ready with the diversion. "On your mark." Emma checked her watch. If the radio intercepts were accurate, they had less than 20 minutes before Ryan's transfer. "Do it." The explosion rocked the entire compound. Through the security feeds, Emma watched as flames erupted from the garage area, consuming vehicles and creating panic among the weapons buyers. The guards exchanged looks before one keyed his radio. "Control, what's our status?" "All units respond." Cobra's voice crackled back. "Secure the merchandise. Protect the buyers." They hesitated only briefly before rushing toward the chaos, leaving the cell block unguarded. Emma moved quickly, using Reed's stolen key card to access the secure area. Ryan looked up as she entered his cell, his face showing a mix of relief and fear. How?" "Save it, little brother." Emma quickly cut his restraints, noting the bruises and electrical burns that covered his arms. "Can you walk?" "Yeah." Ryan stood shakily. "But Emma, there's something you need to know." "The broker." "Later." She handed him a pistol. "Right now we need to move." They made it halfway to the utility room before alarms began blaring. Running feet approached from multiple directions. The tunnels. Emma pushed Ryan toward the maintenance shaft. "Reed's waiting below." Ryan's face darkened. "Reed?" "Emma, you can't trust him. He's the one who—" "I know. But right now he's our best chance." They were almost to the shaft when engines roared in the corridor behind them. Emma turned to see Cobra and 3 other bikers on their motorcycles, weapons raised. Well, Cobra's voice was almost admiring. "The Navy hero returns. And this time she brought friends." Emma pushed Ryan behind her, weapon ready. "It's over, Cobra. Your operation's compromised. Your men are turning on each other. Walk away while you can. Walk away." Cobra laughed. "Commander, you have no idea what you're involved in. The broker? The weapons? That's just the surface." He revved his engine. "But you won't live long enough to learn the rest." The corridor erupted in gunfire as Emma dragged Ryan into the utility room. Bullets sparked off metal as they dove for the maintenance shaft. Reed's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Emma, we've got company down here too. They found the tunnel entrance." Emma looked at Ryan, then back at the door where Cobra's men were preparing to breach. They were trapped between 2 forces, with nowhere left to run. But Emma Lancaster hadn't survived 15 years in the Navy by giving up when things got tough. She quickly surveyed the room, mind racing as she formulated a plan. "Ryan, how steady are your hands?" He managed a grim smile, checking the pistol she'd given him. "Steady enough, sis. Just like the shooting range back home." "Just like the range." Emma began pulling equipment from her tactical vest. "Reed, can you still move?" "Barely. But I've got one more surprise for our friends topside." "Just say when." Emma looked at her brother, seeing the same determination in his eyes that had driven him to investigate the broker in the first place. They were outnumbered, injured, and trapped. But they were also together. And this time, She wasn't leaving anyone behind. Okay, she said, preparing for what would come next. Let's show these outlaws how the Navy handles a fight. The utility room's door began to spark as Cobra's men started cutting through. Above the noise, Emma could hear motorcycles revving, preparing for what they thought would be a slaughter. They had no idea what was coming. But that's another story. The utility room's fluorescent lights flickered as Emma positioned herself between the door and her brother. Ryan leaned against the maintenance shaft entrance, his face pale but determined, while Reed's labored breathing crackled through their comm units from the tunnel below. Cobra's men had stopped cutting through the door. The sudden silence was more unnerving than the noise had been. Commander Lancaster, Cobra's voice carried through the metal. Let's talk about your distinguished military career. Emma caught Ryan's eye, signaling him to be ready. Nothing to talk about, Cobra. You've already made your position clear. Have eyes? A dark chuckle. I did my research after our little gas station encounter. Operation Desert Shield, the Yemen hostage crisis, 2 silver stars for valor under fire. Quite the hero. If you've done your research, Emma replied, then you know how this ends. Oh, I know exactly how this ends. The amusement dropped from Cobra's voice. It ends with you realizing everything you fought for, everything you sacrificed for, was a lie. Heavy footsteps approached the door from multiple directions. They were positioning themselves for a breach. Your precious military? Cobra continued. Your chain of command? They're all on the take. The same people signing your commendations are signing our checks. The whole system's rotten, Commander. At least we're honest about what we are. Emma's mind raced, evaluating options. The maintenance shaft was their only escape route, but with Reed injured below and Ryan barely able to stand, they'd never make it before Cobra's men breached. He's stalling, Ryan whispered. Waiting for backup. Emma knew he was right. But Cobra's words about her chain of command had struck a nerve. What do you mean, signing your checks? Tell her, Ryan. Cobra's voice was smug. Tell Big Sister what you found in those classified files before we caught you. About Operation Clean Sweep. About who really supplies the broker's merchandise. Ryan's face hardened. The weapons shipments. They're not being stolen or diverted. They're being officially transferred, with paperwork signed by senior military commanders. The whole operation has Pentagon approval. Impossible. But even as Emma said it, pieces started falling into place. The military-grade equipment, the professional training, the high-level protection the gang enjoyed. The world's changing, Commander, Cobra said. Official channels, black markets. The lines are blurring. The broker understood that before anyone else. Why do you think they recruited so many ex-military? We're just ahead of the curve. And the people you sell to? Emma's voice was steel. The cartels? The terrorists? Are they ahead of the curve too? Supply and demand. Besides, better to have them buying through controlled channels than starting wars we can't contain. That's what your superiors think, anyway. A new voice crackled through their comms. Reed, his breathing ragged. Emma, multiple vehicles approaching from the north. Looks like the broker's personal security team. They were running out of time. Emma needed to end this. I have proof, she called out. Documentation of the whole operation. One phone call, and it goes public. No, you don't. Cobra's confidence was unshaken. But I'll make you a deal anyway. Surrender now. Tell us where Ryan hid the real evidence, and maybe the broker shows mercy. Ryan suddenly straightened, a fierce light in his eyes. The evidence at the astronomy club? The intel about next week's shipment to Mexico? It's all fake. What? Cobra's voice sharpened. I planted it. False leads, all of them. The real evidence. Ryan managed a pained smile. Well, let's just say the stars aren't the only things that shine at night. Emma caught the gleam in her brother's eye. He was lying, playing for time, but the uncertainty in Cobra's voice suggested it was working. You're bluffing. But Cobra didn't sound sure. The broker's people verified that intel. Did they? Or did they just confirm what they expected to find? Ryan's voice grew stronger. Maybe you should ask yourself why they were so eager to believe it. Who really benefits if that shipment gets intercepted? Confusion rippled through the gang members outside. Emma could hear them muttering, their confidence shaken. "Boss," one voice said, "what if the broker's setting us up? Using us as a distraction while the real shipment—" "Shut up," Cobra roared. "This ends now." The door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and metal. Emma was already moving, shoving Ryan behind an equipment rack as gunfire erupted. Through the chaos, a familiar voice shouted, "Cobra, the broker sent me to clean this up." "Reed." He must have climbed back up through the maintenance shaft while they were distracted. "Stand down." Reed emerged from the smoke, hands raised. "This has gone too far. Let me take them to the broker. We can salvage this." Cobra turned, his weapon tracking Reed's movement. "You? The traitor who ran away? And now you think you can just walk back in?" "I never betrayed the broker," Reed insisted. "Everything I did, including helping these two, was on their orders." "Ask yourself, how did I know about the tunnels? The security protocols? Who do you think authorized my access codes?" Emma saw her chance. As Cobra's attention shifted to Reed, she launched herself at the nearest gang member. Her elbow caught his throat as she stripped his weapon away, using his body as a shield against the others. The room erupted into chaos. Ryan, despite his injuries, managed to knock another gang member's legs out from under him. Reed dove for cover as Cobra's gun roared, the bullet catching him in the shoulder instead of the head. "Kill them all," Cobra screamed. But his men were hesitating, confused by Reed's claims about the broker, unsure who to trust. Emma used their uncertainty to her advantage. Her Navy combat training took over as she engaged multiple opponents simultaneously. A strike to the solar plexus dropped one man. An arm bar dislocated another's shoulder. Each movement flowed into the next with lethal precision. But Cobra was different. He moved with the same military precision she did, anticipating her attacks, countering with brutal efficiency. They crashed through the utility room's equipment, trading blows that would have incapacitated lesser fighters. "Not bad for a Navy princess," Cobra grunted as they grappled. "But you're fighting for a lie. Everything you believe in is corrupt." "Maybe." Emma drove her knee into his kidney. "But at least I believe in something." Their fight carried them across the room, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. Cobra was stronger, but Emma was faster. Each had too much training to make a fatal mistake. Finally, Emma saw her opening. As Cobra committed to a powerful strike, she used his momentum against him, executing a perfect hip throw that sent him crashing into an electrical panel. Sparks exploded as he hit, momentarily stunning him. Emma snatched up a fallen weapon, aiming it at Cobra's head. The room fell silent except for heavy breathing and Reed's pained groans. "Do it," Cobra wheezed. "Prove you're just like us." Emma's finger tightened on the trigger. It would be so easy. After everything he'd done to Ryan, to her, to countless others? No. She adjusted her aim, shooting him in the leg instead. "You're worth more alive. The broker might abandon you, but the authorities will be very interested in what you have to say." Cobra laughed through his pain. "You think this ends here? The broker's people are already." The compound's perimeter alarms suddenly blared to life. Through the windows, they could see multiple vehicles approaching, their occupants clearly not standard gang members. "Emma," Reed called out urgently. "We need to move. Now." She quickly zip-tied Cobra's hands, ignoring his pained curses. Ryan was already helping Reed toward the maintenance shaft, leaving a trail of blood from his reopened wounds. "This isn't over," Cobra spat as Emma began to follow them. She paused at the shaft entrance. "You're right. It's just beginning. And when we expose this whole operation, remember, you helped make it happen." They descended into the tunnels as boots thundered overhead. Emma took point while Ryan supported Reed, who was fading fast from blood loss. "Left at the next junction," Reed gasped. "Emergency exit. Leads to the desert." They could hear pursuit beginning behind them, echoing voices and flashlight beams penetrating the darkness. But Emma had memorized the tunnel layout during their infiltration. She led them through a maze of turns, doubling back occasionally to lay false trails. Almost there, she encouraged as Reed stumbled again. "Stay with us, Emma." Reed's voice was weak. What I did to Ryan, I'm sorry. Save your strength, Ryan interrupted.
We're not even yet.
But helping us escape, it's a start. The exit, when they reached it, was almost invisible, a maintenance hatch disguised as part of the canyon wall. Emma helped Ryan push it open, revealing pre-dawn desert stretching to the horizon. They emerged into cool morning air, the compound's lights barely visible in the distance. Multiple vehicles were parked outside now, their occupants swarming into the facility. The broker's cleanup crew, Reed explained between pained breaths. They'll eliminate any evidence, sanitize the scene. Not all the evidence. Emma helped him onto her motorcycle. Cobra's alive. And he knows his only chance now is to talk. They mounted up, Reed and Ryan on Emma's bike, Emma on Reed's, and rode into the desert as the sun began to rise. Behind them, the compound diminished into the distance, but Emma knew this was far from over. The broker's operation went deeper than any of them had imagined, reaching into the highest levels of military command. The weapons deals, the official cooperation, the systematic corruption, it was all part of a larger plan they were only beginning to understand. But they had something now that they didn't have before, proof. Between Ryan's hidden evidence, Emma's documentation, and Cobra's potential testimony, they could begin to unravel the entire conspiracy. The desert wind whipped past as they rode, the morning stars fading overhead. Emma thought of Ryan's message again, trust no one but the stars. He had been right about the corruption, right about the military connection, right about everything. Now it was time to make sure the whole world knew it too. But first, they needed to get somewhere safe. Reed needed medical attention, Ryan needed to recover his strength, and Emma needed to process everything they'd learned. The broker's organization wouldn't stop hunting them. If anything, they'd redouble their efforts now. Emma smiled grimly as she opened the throttle. Let them come. She was done running, done being the good soldier who followed orders without question. The system she'd dedicated her life to was rotten at its core. Time to burn it all down and start over. The desert stretched endlessly before them as they rode into the rising sun. Behind them, sirens began to wail at the compound, the cleanup crew discovering Cobra, realizing their prisoners had escaped. But they were too late. The confrontation had changed everything. Not just for Emma, Ryan, and Reed, but for the entire operation. The broker's carefully constructed house of cards was about to come crashing down. And somewhere out there, beneath the fading stars, the real war was about to begin. The safe house was a modest beach cottage on the California coast, far from the desert compound where they'd left Reed in the care of his underground contacts. 3 days had passed since their escape, and Emma sat at a weathered kitchen table covered in documents, photos, and her own detailed notes. Ryan dozed on the couch nearby, his injuries slowly healing. The bruises on his face had faded from angry purple to yellowish green, and he could move without wincing now. But the psychological wounds would take longer to heal. Emma studied a photograph of military officials at a charity gala taken 6 months ago. Her finger traced the face of Admiral James Morrison, her former commanding officer. He stood next to a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of charisma that drew people in. That's him. Ryan's voice made her jump. He'd woken and moved to stand behind her. Victor Crane. Ex-CIA, though he'll never admit it officially. He runs a private security consulting firm now, very prestigious. Very connected. The broker? Emma studied the face more carefully. The public face, at least. The organization is bigger than any one person, but Crane's the architect. He saw how unstable the world was becoming and positioned himself to profit from it. Emma spread out more photos, weapons shipments, bank statements, surveillance shots of various players. Tell me everything. Ryan sank into a chair, wincing slightly. It started small, using his CIA contacts to broker deals between friendly governments and approved arms manufacturers. All legal, all above board. But then he realized there was more money in the gray areas. The outlaw gangs? They were just the beginning. Crane understood that chaos creates opportunities. Regional conflicts, civil wars, insurgencies, they all need weapons. But more than that, they need training, intelligence, logistics. The broker provides it all, for a price. Emma's mind raced. And our own people are helping him. It's not that simple. Ryan rubbed his temples. Some think they're serving a greater good. Better to control the flow of arms than let it run wild. Others are true believers in Crane's vision of managed chaos. And some are just bought and paid for, like Admiral Morrison. Ryan's silence was answer enough. Emma reached for her secure phone, a burner provided by Reed's contacts. She needed to talk to someone she still trusted. Sarah Hall answered on the third ring. Emma? Jesus, are you okay? I've been hearing things. I'm fine, Sarah. But I need your help. What do you know about Victor Crane? A sharp intake of breath. Emma, don't.
Please.
That's not a road you want to go down. I'm already on it. Ryan's with me. He's alive, Sarah. Silence stretched for several seconds. Thank God. But, Emma, the things I'm hearing about the brokers' organization, they've got people everywhere. Military, intelligence, law enforcement. Nobody knows who to trust anymore. That's why I need your help. You have access to classified files, deployment records. We need to prove the connection between Crane and the military brass. They'll kill me if they find out. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. They'll kill us all anyway, if we don't stop them. More silence. Then, give me 24 hours. But Emma? Watch your back. There's chatter about a cleanup operation. They're tying up loose ends. The call ended just as Ryan spotted movement outside.
3
black SUVs had turned onto their street, moving with purposeful slowness. Hit squad. Emma was already moving. Back door.
Now.
They grabbed their go-bags, always packed, always ready, and slipped out the rear of the cottage just as the first vehicle pulled into their driveway. Through the kitchen window, Emma caught a glimpse of the team. Tactical gear, professional movements, nothing like the outlaw bikers they'd faced before. These are the brokers' real enforcers, Ryan whispered as they crept through neighboring yards. Ex-special forces, intelligence operators. The best money can buy. A shot cracked past them, splintering a fence post. Their escape hadn't gone unnoticed. Emma pushed Ryan toward a side street where she'd parked their backup vehicle, an inconspicuous sedan with clean papers. Get to the car. I'll draw them off. Like hell. Ryan. She met his eyes. Trust me. For once in your life. Trust your big sister. He hesitated, then nodded. Emma waited until he was moving before breaking cover in the opposite direction, making herself an obvious target. Shots followed her as she zigzagged between houses, but these weren't random gunmen. They were conserving ammunition, working to trap her. A figure appeared ahead of her, weapon raised. Emma dropped and rolled, coming up inside his guard. Her elbow caught his throat as she stripped his rifle away, using the momentum to throw him into his approaching teammate. More shots, more discipline than before. They were hurting her, using standard tactical doctrine to minimize her options. Emma smiled grimly. They weren't the only ones with training. She cut through a garage, emerging onto another street just as Ryan pulled up in the sedan. Emma dove into the passenger seat as rounds peppered the vehicle. Go. Ryan floored it, the sedan's engine roaring as they accelerated away. In the rearview mirror, Emma watched the hit squad remounting their SUVs. They'll have the roads blocked ahead, Ryan said, taking a sharp turn. Ideas? Emma pulled out her phone. Sarah? We need an exit route.
Now.
Head for Marina del Rey. Sarah's voice was tense. Slip 47. Friend of mine owes me a favor. His boat can get you out of the kill zone. They wove through side streets, trying to shake their pursuers while making their way toward the coast. Ryan's time as a detective showed in his driving, unpredictable but controlled, using traffic patterns to their advantage. Tell me about Crane, Emma said as they drove. Everything you learned while investigating him. He was CIA's golden boy in the 90s. Ran operations in Eastern Europe after the Soviet collapse. Lots of weapons floating around, lots of opportunities. But he saw something bigger than just arms dealing.
What?
A new world order. One where private organizations like his could operate in the spaces between nations, profiting from conflict while appearing to maintain stability. The broker's operation isn't just about selling guns. It's about selling influence, control, power itself. Emma's phone buzzed. Sarah again. Emma, I found something. Shipping manifests, classified briefings, financial transfers, it's all here. Crane's been working with military intelligence for years, using official channels to cover his black market operations. Can you prove it? Better. I can prove who's helping him, including Morrison. But, Emma, Crane's hosting some kind of meeting tonight. A yacht called the Kingmaker in international waters. VIP clients, major arms deal in the works. Ryan's hands tightened on the wheel. That's why they hit us now. They're cleaning house before the big show. Emma's mind raced. Sarah, can you get me details on that yacht? Staff manifests, security protocols, anything's already on it. But Emma, these clients, we're talking warlords, terrorist financiers, cartel bosses. The security will be absolute. Maybe not. Ryan took another turn, losing one of their pursuers. The broker's organization works on compartmentalization. Each group only knows their part. The bikers handle transport, the hit squads handle cleanup, the yacht crew handles hospitality. Emma saw where he was going. And they don't talk to each other. Sarah, focus on the crew manifest. Any last-minute additions? Checking, yes. 2 servers called in sick this morning. Replacements haven't been processed yet. Send me everything you have on the yacht. Floor plans, schedules, the works. Ryan glanced at her. You're not thinking? I'm done playing defense. Emma's voice was steel. Crane wants to host a party. Let's crash it. They reached Marina del Rey, with one SUV still on their tail. Sarah's contact turned out to be a former SEAL running a charter business. He took one look at their situation and hurried them onto his speedboat, no questions asked. As they roared out into open water, Emma studied the files Sarah was sending. The Kingmaker was a 200-foot luxury yacht, currently anchored 50 miles offshore. Security would be heavy but focused on external threats, armed boats, aerial assault, underwater approach. They wouldn't be expecting a simple server to be a threat. It's suicide, Ryan argued as they sheltered in the charter boat's cabin. Crane's paranoid. He'll have countermeasures we don't know about. Which is why I'm going alone. Emma reviewed the crew procedures. You and Sarah coordinate from here. Once I'm on board, I'll find proof of everything. The weapons deals, the military connection, all of it. And if something goes wrong, Emma smiled grimly. Then make sure Sarah releases everything we already have. Burn their whole operation to the ground. The day passed in careful preparation. Sarah's intel was solid. The Kingmaker was hosting a private investment conference, with guests arriving by helicopter throughout the evening. The real action would happen in the yacht's secure conference room, where Crane would showcase his latest merchandise to potential buyers. As sunset approached, Emma studied herself in the cabin's mirror. The server's uniform fit perfectly, her hair styled to match the crew requirements. She'd done similar infiltrations during her Navy career, but never with stakes this high. Ryan hugged her fiercely before she boarded the tender that would take her to the yacht. Be careful, Em. These people, they're not like the bikers. They're true believers in what they're doing. That's what makes them dangerous. Emma checked her hidden equipment one last time. But it's also what makes them predictable. The tender approached the yacht as darkness fell. Other crew boats were ferrying supplies and staff, creating controlled chaos that worked in Emma's favor. She joined a group of servers heading aboard, her forged credentials passing the initial security check. As she climbed the steps to the main deck, Emma caught her first glimpse of Victor Crane in person. He stood on the upper deck, greeting guests with practiced charm. Distinguished, confident, charismatic, every inch the successful businessman. Only his eyes gave him away, cold and calculating, seeing people not as individuals, but as pieces on a cosmic chessboard. Emma moved smoothly into the flow of crew activity, already playing her part in the deadliest infiltration of her career. Somewhere above her, Crane continued working the crowd, unaware that his carefully constructed web was about to unravel. The real game was about to begin. The Kingmaker's engine room hummed with quiet efficiency as Emma planted the last explosive charge. She'd spent the past hour using her server's access to move throughout the yacht, placing charges at strategic points. Each device was small but powerful, designed to disable rather than destroy. She wanted to trap Crane's guests on board until authorities arrived, not send them to the bottom of the Pacific. All charges set, she whispered into her concealed comm unit. Ryan, what's your status? Holding position 300 yards out, her brother's voice crackled back. Coast Guard standing by on my signal, but they won't move without concrete evidence of illegal activity. Emma checked her watch. The main presentation was scheduled to begin in 20 minutes. She'd seen the guests arriving throughout the evening, a rogues gallery of international arms dealers, terrorist financiers, and corrupt officials. But the real prize was in Crane's private office, documentation of every deal, every connection, every betrayal. Heading to the upper deck now, she said, smoothing her server's uniform. Maintain radio silence unless emergency. The yacht's main salon was transformed into a luxury showroom. Behind locked glass cases, advanced weapons systems gleamed under careful lighting. Emma recognized military prototypes that shouldn't exist outside of classified facilities. As she circulated with a tray of champagne, she activated the tiny camera hidden in her collar button, documenting everything. Victor Crane stood at the center of it all, every inch the sophisticated businessman in his tailored suit. But Emma saw past the facade now. She noticed how his security team maintained specific distances, how his eyes constantly scanned the room, how his left hand never strayed far from the button that would trigger the yacht's lockdown protocols. Ladies and gentlemen, Crane's voice carried effortlessly across the salon. If you'll follow me to the conference room, we can begin our main presentation. The guests moved as directed, but Emma's attention was drawn to movement on the aft deck. A helicopter was approaching, one that wasn't on the approved flight manifest. Ryan, she whispered, breaking radio silence. Unexpected arrival. Can you identify? A pause then. Holy shit. It's Cobra. He's alive, and he's got a team with him. Emma's mind raced. Cobra had survived the broker's hit squad, and now he was here, either for revenge or to cut a deal. Either way, it complicated everything. Crane noticed the helicopter too. She saw him gesture subtly to his security chief, who immediately began dispersing teams to defensive positions. The guests were ushered more quickly toward the conference room as Crane himself moved toward his private office. The helicopter landed as Emma followed the crowd. Through the windows, she saw Cobra step out, surrounded by armed men who definitely weren't Black Reapers. Military contractors, based on their gear and formation. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm, Crane announced as security doors began sliding closed throughout the yacht. We're implementing standard security protocols due to an unexpected arrival. Emma slipped away from the group just before the conference room sealed. She had minutes, maybe seconds, before the entire situation exploded. Gunfire erupted from the aft deck, Cobra's team engaging with Crane's security. Emma used the distraction to make her way toward Crane's office, shedding her server's uniform to reveal tactical gear underneath. She reached the office door just as Crane emerged, clutching a metal briefcase. Their eyes met, recognition flashing across his face. "Commander Lancaster," he said calmly, as if greeting an old friend. "I was wondering when you'd make your move." "It's over, Crane. We have everything, the weapons deals, the military connections, all of it." He smiled, but his eyes were cold. "Do you really think you're the first to try bringing me down? Ask yourself why your superiors never investigated Ryan's claims. Why Admiral Morrison buried his reports. Because you bought them off. Because they understand the reality of our world." Crane's smile faded. "Your brother didn't. Just like you, he clung to outdated notions of right and wrong. Morrison gave him every chance to join us, to understand the bigger picture. When he refused, the implications hit Emma like a physical blow. Morrison ordered his disappearance. With my organization's help, yes. He thought having Ryan in custody would convince you to be more reasonable. Your naval career was quite promising, Commander. It still could be." More gunfire, closer now. Cobra's team was pushing through the yacht's security, leaving chaos in their wake. "Last chance," Crane said. Join us. Help us maintain order in an increasingly chaotic world. Or share your brother's fate. Emma's response was a lightning-fast strike at his throat. But Crane was no ordinary bureaucrat. He blocked with practiced ease, countering with a move that spoke of serious close combat training. They fought through the corridor, each landing telling blows. Emma was younger, faster, but Crane had experience and a ruthless efficiency that made him deadly. The briefcase became a weapon in his hands, its metal edges leaving deep gashes when they connected. The yacht rocked with an explosion, Cobra's team breaching the inner security doors. Through the windows, Emma saw Orion's speedboat maneuvering closer, ready for extraction. She ducked under Crane's swing and drove her knee into his solar plexus. He staggered but managed to trigger a hidden panic button. Emergency bulkheads began slamming down throughout the vessel. "You can't win," he gasped. "Even if you kill me, the organization continues. We're too big, too integrated into the system." "Maybe." Emma landed a brutal combination that finally dropped him. "But we can expose you. Show the world what you really are." She grabbed the briefcase, but movement behind her made her spin. Cobra stood in the corridor, blood streaming from a head wound, his weapon trained on her. Well, he sneered. "The gang's all here." "Cobra." Crane's voice was strained but commanding. "Kill her, and everything we discussed is yours." But Cobra's aim shifted to Crane. "You sent a hit squad after me. After years of loyal service." "Business," Crane said simply. "Nothing personal." Emma saw her chance. As Cobra's attention focused on Crane, she struck, disarming him with a move she'd learned in Navy combat training. They grappled briefly before muscle memory took over, the same sequences they'd fought through in the desert. This time, though, they were interrupted by Crane's security team approaching from both directions. In an unspoken agreement, Emma and Cobra found themselves fighting back-to-back against the tactical teams. Just like old times, Cobra grunted as they engaged multiple opponents. "Shut up and fight." It was brutal, desperate combat in the confined space. Emma and Cobra moved with complementary precision, each covering the other's blind spots as they fought off waves of attackers. But Crane was escaping, clutching his precious briefcase as he headed for the helipad. Cobra saw it too. Without warning, he turned his weapon on Emma. "Sorry, Commander. But that evidence is my ticket to a new life." A shot rang out. Cobra's eyes widened as blood bloomed on his chest. Behind him, Ryan stood in a blown-out window, his smoking gun still raised. "That's for 6 months of torture," Ryan said. Emma didn't wait for Cobra to fall. She sprinted after Crane, leaving her brother to deal with any remaining security teams. The yacht's deck was slick with sea spray as she emerged into the night air. Crane was already starting the helicopter's engine. Emma launched herself at the cockpit, smashing through the plexiglass to drag him out. They fought savagely on the helipad, all pretense of sophistication gone. "You don't understand what you're destroying," Crane spat blood as they grappled. "The system needs us. Without controlled chaos, there's only anarchy." "No," Emma drove her fist into his face. "The system needs justice. It needs truth." She finally got the briefcase, but Crane pulled a hidden pistol. "Your commanding officer gave the order," he snarled. "Morrison personally signed Ryan's death warrant. How does it feel, knowing everything you fought for was a lie?" "Not everything." Emma smiled. "The Navy taught me this." Her kick caught him perfectly, sending him sprawling across the deck. The pistol skittered away as Ryan emerged from below, covering Crane with his weapon. "Emma," Ryan shouted. "Company coming." Multiple boats were approaching through the darkness, reinforcements for the broker. They were out of time. Emma pulled the detonator from her tactical vest. "Ready to end this?" Ryan nodded grimly. Just like the 4th of July, the first explosion took out the yacht's communications array. The second disabled the engines. More charges detonated in sequence, cutting off escape routes and trapping Crane's clients in the conference room. "You're insane." Crane tried to rise but couldn't. "Those people in there, they're some of the most dangerous individuals in the world. That's the idea." Emma activated her emergency beacon. The Coast Guard's already moving in. Everyone on this boat is about to have a very interesting conversation with federal authorities. Crane lunged for his fallen pistol, but Ryan was faster. A single shot ended the broker's reign permanently. "We need to move," Ryan said as more explosions rocked the yacht. Sarah's got the evidence uploading to every major news outlet. By morning, Morrison and everyone else connected to this will be finished. They made their way to the extraction point where Ryan's speedboat waited. Behind them, the Kingmaker listed heavily, secondary explosions lighting up the night sky as ammunition cooked off in the weapons cases. Coast Guard vessels were closing in, their sirens dopplering across the water. In the distance, news helicopters were already approaching, drawn by the explosions and Emma's anonymous tip. As they sped away from the dying yacht, Emma clutched the briefcase containing proof of everything, every deal, every betrayal, every corrupt official who had helped build the broker's empire. By sunrise, none of them would have anywhere to hide. "You okay?" Ryan asked as they put distance between themselves and the chaos. Emma watched the Kingmaker begin its final descent into the Pacific. Years of naval service, of believing in the chain of command, of trusting the system, it hadn't all been a lie. But it needed to change. "I will be," she said finally. "We've got work to do." The sunrise painted the horizon in shades of gold and crimson as they headed for the coast. Behind them, the broker's carefully constructed web of influence and corruption was unraveling, its architect gone, its secrets exposed to the light of day. Emma thought of Morrison and the other officials who would soon face justice. The betrayal still stung, but she had something they'd lost long ago, principles worth fighting for. And she wasn't fighting alone anymore. The briefcase sat heavy in her lap as they cut through the waves. Within its pages lay the truth about a corrupt system, but also the chance to rebuild something better. It wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, denial, attempts to bury the evidence. But Emma Lancaster had never backed down from a fight, and this time she had right on her side. The stars were fading from the pre-dawn sky as they approached the coast. Emma smiled, remembering Ryan's message that had started it all: trust no one but the stars.
He'd been wrong about that, she realized.
You could trust people, not with blind faith, but with open eyes and unwavering principles. The kind of trust forged in combat, tested by betrayal, and ultimately proven in the crucible of justice. The sun broke free of the horizon as they reached the marina. It was a new day in more ways than one. And somewhere out there, other corrupt officials, other arms dealers, other brokers of chaos were about to learn a valuable lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one you can buy off or intimidate. Sometimes it's the one who still believes in justice, even if they have to fight the whole damn system to achieve it. The morning sun bathed Sarah Hall's apartment in golden light as she worked, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards. Screens surrounded her, each showing different news networks picking up the story. Emma and Ryan sat on the couch, watching their world change in real time. Admiral Morrison arrested in massive arms trafficking investigation. One headline blazed. "Military corruption scandal rocks Pentagon," declared another. "International arms dealer, the broker, found dead in yacht incident," a third announced. Sarah turned from her workstation, exhaustion and triumph warring on her face. It's done. Every major news outlet has the files. Social media's exploding. No one can bury this now. Emma watched as footage played of Morrison being led from his home in handcuffs, his distinguished career ending in disgrace. The man who had mentored her, promoted her, and ultimately betrayed everything they'd sworn to protect. "How many so far?" Ryan asked, his hand unconsciously touching the healing wounds on his face. 17 high-ranking military officers, Sarah counted off. 23 government officials. Dozens of private contractors. And those are just the American conspirators. Interpol's moving on international targets as we speak. Emma's phone buzzed with a message from Reed, still recovering at his underground clinic. "Turn on Channel 7. They did, just in time to see federal agents raiding the Black Reaper's compound. Evidence crews swarmed the facility, while suspects were let out in chains. But Cobra wasn't among them. He survived the yacht, Ryan said grimly. Again. But he's running with a bullet wound and no support network, Emma reminded him. The broker's dead, his organization's in chaos. Cobra's just another outlaw now. Sarah brought them coffee as more news rolled in. The broker's carefully constructed empire was unraveling hour by hour. Shell companies exposed, bank accounts frozen, safe houses raided. Decades of corruption and illegal arms deals laid bare for the world to see. I just got word from my contact at JAG, Sarah said. They're opening investigations into every weapons contract for the past decade. The whole system's getting an overhaul. Ryan stood by the window, watching the city wake up to a changed world. It doesn't feel real yet. All those months in that cell, thinking no one was coming. Emma joined him, putting a hand on his shoulder. I should have come sooner. Should have listened when you tried to tell me something was wrong.
Hey.
Ryan turned to face her. You came when it mattered most. And you burned down their whole corrupt empire to save me. That's a pretty good big sister in my book. Tears threatened, but Emma held them back. We've got a lot of lost time to make up for.
Yeah, well.
Ryan managed a smile. I hear I'm getting full reinstatement to the force, with back pay. Figure that'll buy a lot of family dinners. Sarah cleared her throat. Speaking of reinstatement, Emma, I've been talking to some people.
Good people, ones we can trust.
There's a movement growing within the Navy, officers who want to clean house completely. They need leadership. Someone who's proven they'll stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. Emma shook her head. I don't know, Sarah. After everything that's happened, that's exactly why it has to be you, Sarah insisted. You're the one who exposed the corruption. You're the one who proved the system can be fixed if people are willing to fight for it. She's right, Ryan added. Think about all the other officers out there, the ones who suspected something was wrong but were afraid to speak up. They need to know they're not alone. Emma was quiet for a long moment, watching more news footage of arrests and revelations. She thought of her years of service, of the oath she'd taken to protect and defend. The system had been corrupted, but the principles behind it, the ideals of justice and integrity, those were still worth fighting for. Maybe, she said finally. But first, there's something I need to do. 2 days later, Emma's triumph roared across the desert highway. The gas station where it all began appeared on the horizon, looking exactly as it had that fateful day. She pulled up to the same pump, killed the engine, and looked around. The place was empty except for Betty, the attendant who'd been working when the Black Reapers had first confronted her. The older woman recognized her immediately. Well, look who's back, Betty smiled. Been seeing you all over the news, honey. You sure stirred up a hornet's nest. That I did. Emma filled her tank, enjoying the familiar routine. Thought it was time to come full circle. Those bikers won't be bothering anyone anymore, I hear. Betty's voice held satisfaction. Good riddance to bad rubbish, my mama would say. Emma was about to respond when a motorcycle pulled up to the adjacent pump. Her hand instinctively moved toward her weapon, but it wasn't a Black Reaper. Just a young woman on a sport bike, looking nervous about being alone at a remote station. First long-distance ride? Emma asked, recognizing the tension in the rider's posture. That obvious, huh? The woman managed a sheepish smile. Kept telling myself I was ready, but... You are. Emma helped her check her tire pressure. The road can be dangerous, but that's no reason not to ride it. Just need to be prepared, stay alert, and remember you're stronger than you think. The woman's smile grew more confident. Thanks. Hey, aren't you that Navy commander from the news? The one who exposed all that corruption? Just someone who believes in justice, Emma replied. Safe travels. She watched the young rider pull away, remembering her own first solo journey. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, full of both danger and possibility. Just like life itself. Her phone buzzed, Ryan sending her a photo. He was back at his desk at the police department, badge restored, already diving into cold cases. First day back, the message read. Feels good to be fighting the good fight again. Emma smiled, mounting her bike. The sun was setting behind her as she rode east, towards new horizons and new challenges. The broker's organization was finished, But there would always be others trying to profit from chaos and corruption. Always be battles worth fighting. But now she knew she wasn't fighting alone. Miles away, in a dingy border town bar, Cobra nursed his wounds and his grudges. Around him sat a handful of former military contractors, mercenaries, and outlaws, all displaced by the broker's fall, all hungry for revenge and redemption. "The old way is finished," he told them, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won knowledge. "But out of chaos comes opportunity. We just need to be smart, be patient, and wait for our moment." His audience nodded, drawn in by his vision just as the original Black Reapers had been. The wheel would turn again, he knew. And next time, he'd be ready. Back on the highway, Emma rode into the gathering dusk. Her headlight carved a path through the darkness as the first stars began to appear overhead. She thought of Ryan's message, "Trust no one but the stars," and finally understood its full meaning. 6 months earlier, Ryan sat at his desk, the evidence of corruption and betrayal spread before him. His hands shook as he wrote the note, knowing his sister might be the only one who could understand its true meaning. "Trust no one but the stars," he wrote, remembering their childhood nights spent stargazing on the roof. Emma teaching him the constellations, explaining how sailors had used them for navigation since ancient times. Constants in a changing world, guides that could never be corrupted or bought. He hoped she would remember, hoped she would understand that even in the darkest night, there were still fixed points of truth and justice to guide the way. Present day. The stars wheeled overhead as Emma rode, ancient and unchanging. She had followed them back to her brother, back to the truth, back to herself. They had led her through the darkness of corruption and out the other side, stronger and more determined than ever. Sarah's words echoed in her mind. There's a movement growing within the Navy. Officers who want to clean house completely. They need leadership. Maybe that was her next mission. Not just exposing corruption, but helping to build something better in its place. Teaching a new generation of officers that integrity wasn't just a word, but a way of life. The highway stretched endlessly before her, full of possibility. Emma Lancaster, sister, sailor, warrior for justice, rode into the night, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The stars guided her way, just as they always had, just as they always would. Behind her, the gas station dwindled in her mirrors until it was indistinguishable from the stars themselves. A reminder that every ending was also a beginning, every victory the start of a new battle. But that was okay. Emma had found her true north, her fixed point in a chaotic world. Not just the stars above, but the principles they represented. Constancy, truth, justice. Some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And she would keep fighting, 1 mile at a time, one battle at a time, until the last star burned out in the desert sky. The future was uncertain, but her path was clear. Emma gunned the engine, her triumph's roar echoing across the desert night. Somewhere out there, corrupt officials still plotted, arms dealers still schemed, injustice still festered in the shadows.
Good.
She had work to do. The stars beckoned overhead, eternal and unchanging, as Emma Lancaster rode into legend. Not as a Navy commander, not as a hero, but as something even more powerful, a warrior for justice who had found her true calling. The desert night swallowed her headlight until it was just another star in the endless tapestry overhead. But her story wasn't over. It was just beginning.
The end.
What would you have done in Emma's position when she discovered her own commanding officer was involved in the conspiracy? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Remember to turn on notifications so you never miss a new story, and if you know someone who loves tales of justice being served, share this with them. See you in the next one.